Hello, everyone. Welcome to Online Seller UK podcast. Today, I'm talking with Huw regarding procurement and manufacturing from the Far East, but also we'll be talking about the recent situations with regards to logistics point of view and what's happening with it. So, welcome, Huw, to the Online
Hey,
Seller. Yeah, yeah. So you, I think it will be good for you to start with your quick introduction, what you do, and then we'll get cracking with the conversation.
yeah, fantastic. I suppose, hello everyone. My name's Huw. I'm from GHL Sourcing. We are a sort of sourcing company. We deal with procurement and manufacturing in the Far East for companies all over the world, but predominantly in the UK and in Europe. And yeah, we're used to dealing with all sorts of problems and hiccups and manufacturing and all the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah. So Huw, I think with the recent situation in terms of logistics, so what's happening out there? So should we start thinking about procuring, or should we pause it for now due to the current situation?
I think things in China and China is the predominant country that we procure from ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Things in China obviously were on lockdown themselves, but I think it was yesterday or the day before that they announced that Hubei province is now open. People can travel in and out of Hubei province, and companies are going back to work in Wuhan, which was the epicenter of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so I think in reality, as we're going into lockdown, China and the Far East is almost coming out of lockdown at this point. And so factories are starting back up again, production is underway and goods are moving. And so realistically, I suppose now probably isn't the right time to be purchasing from the Far East, but for UK reasons rather than Far East reasons. And so I suppose really it would be a case of looking at stock flow, looking at if your online portals are working and making a judgment from the UK side of things rather than from the Far East.
Okay. No, that's good to hear that things are improving that end. So if I am looking for sourcing something from China, what are the common things that I need to start thinking about?
I suppose the first thing is finding a suitable manufacturer, or really if a manufacturer is the best port of call for you. I suppose when you're looking at the Far East, there is a huge number of sort of agents and manufacturers that might be selling or making the product. As with everything, it's about doing research and making sure that you're sort of making the right partnerships with the right companies in the Far East for what you're looking for. It might be that price is very important. It might be that capacity or volume is very important. And these are the conversations that you need to have to make sure that you're forming those partnerships. I would say the biggest pitfall that we come across in terms of arm's length procurement and arm's length manufacturing is quality. And really sort of determining if the quality is acceptable for you. I think we've previously written a sort of a blog post on it, but quality is not a defined sort of standard, and it varies between product and company and material. And so really it's about making sure that the quality that you're buying at is the correct level of quality for you. And the only surefire way to do that is sampling.
Oh, excellent. So you've started touch base on sampling. So when we think about ordering a product, so we think about the product is good quality. So it's sampling the right way, or do you think even after sampling we have to do other checks?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say it's about it would depend on the value and the risk associated with your purchase. So if, for example, you're only purchasing a very small amount of product, there, at that stage, you're not going to be able to do a comprehensive kind of inspection, pre-shipment inspection and quality management protocol.
Yeah.
However, if you're looking at a much larger purchase with a much higher risk associated with it, it might be that sort of full quality management protocol is put in place to ensure that what you're getting is as it should be.
Okay. And do you think we should go and see them as a start, or do you think we should? How do we start on building that rapport?
I suppose the first thing that you look at is communication and how good that communication is. There is a language barrier between you and the Far East.
Yeah.
And so making sure that communication is good and fast and clear, I would say, are the first principles that you should be looking at. A company in the UK buying product from the Far East is highly unlikely to meet them other than over the internet. And therefore you've got to make sure that communication is good and that there is no issues. And I think that's sort of a point that needs to be sort of hit home, is that it's really easy to pretend you can understand someone, whereas actually understanding them is more complex. And so I think it's really important to make sure that communication is understood by both parties. Yeah,
there is a cultural differences as well, I believe, and that has got a major impact on how we.
Yeah, I think and this the devil's in the detail, as it always is. But I think when you're dealing with China, they will make different assumptions than we make because of the cultural differences. And so we may assume that no one would create a box that weighs 50 kilograms that no one could lift. Whereas in China, they might think that everyone's using a forklift, and therefore why would they bother making a carton weigh 15 kilograms? And so there's different assumptions. And I think that it's often these assumptions that cause problems. One person assuming the other person understands, or assuming they understand the system that they're working through. And so I think from that point of view, again, it's about clear, concise communication and detailed communication, so that there's no assumptions in there.
Okay, excellent. So I think when we start talking with them remotely, we're talking here, I think it's foremost, everyone would be a little bit nervous trying to pay. I think that first transaction, which is normal, I think, to pay someone, who you don't know. So how do you deal with that situation?
I suppose it's all about your preparation, I suppose, is the answer. And you can, if you've vetted the companies properly and you've established that they are a legitimate kind of manufacturing entity, maybe you've got hold that, they've given you some references that you could have checked up on before, customers that they've worked with previously, or potentially you've checked on their background and looked at their sort of finances, those sorts of things. They would give you confidence. I would say that the principles of buying from China, to an extent, mirror the principles of buying from anywhere. So, I mean, if you were buying in the UK and you were sort of getting a tradesman in to do a building project, you would get multiple quotes. You would check their backgrounds. You would look at references from what they've done. And so, from that basis, it's no different. Taking it a step further, there are obviously sort of systems in place where you can purchase, for example, through Alibaba, and you could use their trade assurance measure to kind of insure the product. And at that stage, the money goes into an escrow account and isn't released until you okay the kind of the goods arriving. And so as much as we don't endorse Alibaba for more than being a reference point, they do have some quite useful sort of processes that can be used for an initial payment.
Okay, no, that's good. So so I've done the payment. So let's, for example. So what are the other things I need to think about to bring the product into the UK? What are the logistics behind it?
Yeah, I suppose before sort of looking at logistics, I think one of the important things that people need to do at the beginning is to work out their landed cost.
Okay.
So they need to work out what the true cost of the product to their warehouse or to their sort of storage unit. And therefore they need to know sort of the commodity code for the product, and that can be found on a HMRC website.
Yes.
And when they know the commodity code, they know the import duty that's payable.
Okay.
And so then they'll be able to work out what duty is payable on the product. And then they can look at the logistics side of things, and they can say, is air freight good for me, or should I be looking at sort of ocean freight? And then they can sort of incorporate that into their pricing as well. And then they will have a sort of a true value, because the price from the factory is not the price to their door.
Yes.
And so I think it's really important that people understand that there are additional costs involved in getting product from the Far East to the UK. But I suppose in terms of logistics, it's all about working out your CBM for ocean freight, the cubic meter size of the goods, and any sort of factory and supplier should be able to give you carton dimensions and carton weights. And then it's just a case of talking to a logistics provider or freight forwarder about how you can get delivery and cost sort of from that.
Okay, so with the logistic provider, do you think it's better for us to organize the delivery to the UK ourselves, or if manufacturer provides the service, should we take that on? What's your thoughts on that?
Swings and roundabouts. So we always deal with the logistics ourselves. We never let a manufacturer organize it for us.
Okay.
The main reason for that is that there can sometimes be hidden costs involved. So, for example, and this is where you need to understand your interco terms. So when you buy goods from the Far East, they will be bought on a certain trading term. So, for example, they might be bought FOB. Now, FOB means freight on board, which means that the factory covers the cost of those goods from their warehouse to the port and onto the vessel. It might be that the goods are bought on ex-works terms, which means the goods are essentially in their warehouse and you need to organise the collection, dispatch and delivery onwards. Really, I suppose the issues that can happen with logistics are where a factory might give you a CIF cost. Now, that's cargo, insurance and freight, but that only includes delivery to the port in the UK at destination. And therefore, at that point, you might be hit with quite a large handover fee, where a UK customs broker will charge you, a couple of £100 for them to take the goods over and to deal with it. And so sometimes the freight cost from a supplier is too good to be true, and comes with hidden costs later on. And so we're always a bit cautious. That said, if you have a great manufacturer and a great relationship with them, then they will probably give you a fair and honest shipping price, at which case there would be no problem. But again, it's about making that judgment call.
Okay, excellent. And what about the documentation? Is there any documentation that we need to think about, be prepared in advance?
For import into the UK?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely there is, yeah. So sort of if you're using ocean freight, which is the cheapest and most common sort of route for sort of freight, you will need what's known as a bill of lading. Now, this is issued by the export company or the export shipper in destination. And I suppose there are two different ways of getting that document to you. You can do what's known as a telex release, where essentially the sender needs to authorize the release, and then that is electronically transferred over to the UK. Or they work on original documents, in which case the original documents need to be sent over to the UK, and those original documents then need to go to the clearance broker when they're imported. And so, the bill of lading is seriously important when it comes to importing goods. Air freight works slightly differently, and they work on a sort of a way bill, and that is essentially issued and dealt with by the courier normally.
Okay. And what about any registration in terms of we as an importer of the product? Do we need to do any extra registrations with the MS?
Yeah, absolutely. So you would need to register for an EORI number.
Okay.
It's not a difficult process to register for. You can do that online, and normally you get sent a number within a couple of minutes.
Okay.
If you are VAT registered, you need
Yeah.
to link your VAT number with your EORI number.
Yeah.
And if you transition from being unregistered for VAT and then registered, you need to update your EORI number.
Okay.
The reason that this is important is because once the goods come into the UK, HMRC will issue a C79 certificate, which is
Okay.
needed for your VAT return.
Right.
And without that, it becomes very difficult. So
Right.
it's worth keeping on top of.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we've covered from sort of A to Z, really, in some ways. And there are lots of documents you've talked about, which is really helpful. You've given us quite a lot of tips to talk to a manufacturer, so that's really great. So it's yes, we've covered this within 10-15 minutes call, and it can be complicated, and sometimes we don't want to get things wrong. So I believe you support a retailer to go through all this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose as a company, our purpose is to sort of deal with all of these things. So, we have our own, factory vetting sort of procedure. We have our own quality management protocol.
Yeah.
And so really what we do is smooth out the entire process. We are a professional procurement company.
Yeah.
And so we work almost as an outsourced procurement company for our clients.
Right.
And so, yes, we deal with sort of all these problems. And I suppose the number of issues that can come up are almost endless to talk about in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I suppose sometimes it's just about experience is the only way to get through it.
Exactly. And do you serve people like one-man band to a large retailer, or
Yeah,
how does it work?
No, we work with companies from startups all the way through
Yeah.
to kind of multinationals. We work with and I suppose that really is a sign about a sort of a sign of what we do is that we can help the startups, the inventors, the product developers, all the way through to the multinationals, who some of which have their own sourcing departments in the countries that we're supplying them.
Yes.
But really, I suppose it's relationship, experience, and all of the above that allows us to operate there.
Okay, excellent. So before we close the call, Huw, if somebody is to find you, where is the best place to go to find you?
So our website, www.ghlsourcing.com. There's a lot of information on there as well. And there's all our sort of contact details and telephone numbers on there. Just give us a call, book a consultation. I'm more than happy to talk to people about any problems that they're having, and in reality, sort of give them any tips that they might need, or sort of help out if they want on a project. Either way, it's fine with us.
Yeah, that's excellent. Right. So, okay, thank you very much, Huw, for your time today. I'll speak to you soon.
No problem.
All the best.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.